Hello, my name is Susan Acland-Hood, and I'm the Chief Executive of Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunals Service, which means that I run the courts and tribunals in England and Wales, and some tribunals in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I've talked about technology being the servant of reform rather than its master, but there are some things that technology lets us do allow us to think about the system in a different way. I'll give a few examples. I talked a little bit about the civil system earlier. One of the things that we started to introduce is the ability for people to offer and comment on settlements online without prejudice outside the court. This kind of online dispute resolution is something we're now starting to see across the world. There are a whole range of opportunities to think differently about how technology can support people in negotiation with each other and in settlement of disputes. We're looking at all sorts of techniques for the future, like blind bidding, where each side sets out the frame in which they'd be prepared to settle, and the computer looks at the overlap between the two brackets. We're also looking at how we can use video in our system to address some of the challenges that come from distance, but also from nervousness about coming face to face with someone, perhaps in the criminal system or in our family courts, who has offered a threat in the past. We now pre-record the testimony and cross-examination of some of our most vulnerable victims and witnesses in some of our courts, to make sure that people are not re-victimised by the experience of being cross-examined in court in front of somebody who may have offered a threat to them in the past. We've seen that for children, for example, this can mean the ability to give evidence in cross-examination closer to the events, to make sure that people don't have to repeat that testimony if for any reason the court case is delayed or put off. And we're also looking at how we can use video to substitute for some of the hearings which are just there to manage the process. I still question why, in so many instances, we pull people together physically from across the country just to discuss how the case is to be taken forward, or how many witnesses there are to be, or what the process will be for the next stage. Some of those things may not need a physical meeting at all, but if they do, video is often a really good way of doing it that saves time for everybody involved and for the court. We're also working hard in crime to think about how the court can manage the hugely increasing volume of multimedia evidence. More and more police officers wear body-worn video, and we see enormous amounts of CCTV footage being shown in our courts. The infrastructure we've had in the past hasn't always coped well with the transfer of this huge volume of data. And even the practices of those in the courtroom themselves has had to change as more and more evidence consists of data downloaded from innumerable mobile phones. This has given a set of challenges around disclosure for prosecution colleagues, but it also means that we in the courts need to think about how that evidence is captured, recorded, and displayed. We have the additional challenge of displaying evidence to juries. And as an example of our approach, which often involves experimentation and testing, our first proposition for looking at how we would show evidence to juries was cumbersome, involved a very expensive and large supplier. It turned out that a better answer was a tiny red button device often used by gamers to record their gaming sessions. The challenge being that it's not legally correct to give the jury the whole of a video of which only part was shown in the hearing in the courtroom. They must have available to them exactly what was shown during the trial, to review, to check, and to look at, not more and not less. And so the gaming recording device, which catches exactly what was shown on the screen in the court and makes precisely that available for easy playback, is a brilliant but simple solution, something that we've tested in a small number of our Crown courts and are now rolling out across the country. This combination of bespoke technology and good use of existing simple solutions is helping to make sure that our courts can respond to the ever-changing technological challenges of the world around, and that we can bring these good practices to the way we work effectively. I'm now going to talk a bit more about the way we've changed our own organisation to help us work differently in the future. In the past, the courts have been very paper heavy, and that's meant administrators needed to sit next to the pile of paper they were working on. The UK court system is very small by Indian standards, but it still gives us some challenges. In some 350 court buildings, we have somewhere close to 350 tiny administrative teams, each doing their own work on the back office processes of the court. This brings challenge. It makes it hard for us to move people. When one person is sick, that's often a large chunk of the team. It makes it hard for us to have consistent systems and processes so that people know that things are done the same way everywhere across the country. It also means that sometimes things go missing and are hard to locate. So we are thinking about how we can organise ourselves differently to bring together the administration of the court in fewer, larger centres. This fits hand in hand with digitisation. It means that we can apply consistent processes, that we can reliably do things like answer the telephone, even if there are fewer people than we expected in work. Because in a large centre, if one person's off, there's always someone else who can step in. It means we can cross-train people and use the very latest systems for making sure that everything we do works well. Really good quality telephony, web chat, call handling, and other systems for making sure we can support and help people through the stages of their applications. It's easy to forget that running the courts and the justice system is not just about court hearings. They're vital, and they're an important moment in the history of many cases. But for example, of the 2 million civil cases that come through the English and Welsh courts each year, only around 50,000 end in a court hearing. The rest are settled beforehand, either by the parties themselves, through the diligent work of the lawyers involved, or increasingly through things like the mediation processes that I spoke about. This means that we need to attend not just to the 50,000 cases that end in a hearing, but also to the vast majority that don't, whose settlement is equally important for the certainty and stability that those bringing action need. So, though it can be less glamorous to talk about the back office administrative processes than what happens in the drama of the courtroom itself, from the point of view of giving people what in most cases they want, which is a clear outcome to their case, it's right that we give it good quality attention and think about it hard. There are also some really interesting examples of where technology can drive changes in people's behaviour. Now that the police in most cases wear body-worn video cameras, one of the interesting effects was a huge change in the volume not just of complaints about assaults on police officers, but also complaints about the behaviour of the police themselves. There is a debate about whether this is because the police are behaving better knowing that they are being observed by their own cameras, or whether it is because there are fewer accusations that are not founded by people who know that the cameras will show that the thing they're saying is untrue. But either way, and truth be told, it's got to be a combination of both, hasn't it? This is a fundamental and positive shift in behaviour. And we're seeing interest in extending body-worn cameras into other areas, to be worn by people like bailiffs when they're enforcing court debt, or indeed in some cases by prison officers. The huge volume of data that flows from those cameras causes not only challenges for courts in processing, though, but also questions about privacy. We've seen some of this already in relation to CCTV cameras on the street. There's also a great debate raging about the use of facial recognition technology by the police and others. In all of these, law and the justice system play two roles, both as a user of the technology themselves and as part of the system for regulating and ensuring that it's used properly and appropriately, and that safeguards and frameworks that are put in place are there to keep us safe, not just from the obvious threats of those who may mean us harm, but the more insidious risks of everything being known by everyone, without let or hindrance. I think these debates are incredibly important, and I think that it's right that those involved in law and justice should play an active part in trying to help strike the right balance. I also want to talk a little bit about open data and the openness and transparency of the court system. Some have expressed concern that the use of digital technology might make the courts less open, that, for example, hearings on video might not be susceptible to the long-standing tradition that anyone can walk into the back of a court hearing and see what is being said and done, because sunlight is so often the best disinfectant. I believe passionately that video and other digital technologies have the opportunity to make the court process far more open. They may mean that we have to think about openness differently, to give people, for example, opportunities to watch video hearings from other courts from those in which they're taking place, or from every court in which a party is present, rather than, as with a physical hearing, knowing exactly where it is. But there's also a different kind of openness, the openness that comes from the availability of data about what is happening in the courts. And this is something where the example of the changes that have been made in India through the eCourts project are ones that we want to take home and study very carefully. The ability to look at information about cases in any court in India at the touch of a button is remarkable, particularly given the scale at which everything is operated here. It's something that we want to study and learn from. Here again, there are many people who see a huge range of opportunities to use the data that is generated from court information to democratize and open up the system. Perhaps there are others who see the opportunity to make great profit from predictive analytics and the analysis of past case data. Again, this is an area where we need to think carefully with our judicial and other colleagues about how we make sure that we are taking great opportunities that digital technology offers us for opening up the court system in all sorts of ways, both through the observation of cases and through the understanding of the process that data can offer, without risking the challenge that the analysis of the data might drive the embedding of past bias, or perhaps inappropriate criticism being levelled at the judiciary, who are and must remain independent. These are some of the challenges that we face as we start to think about how the system can evolve. But in my view, they are good challenges to encounter, because they are about fundamental improvement that we can make to the system. Like so many of the leaps forward of the past, they don't come without controversy and debate. But the controversy and the debate is worth working through in order to get to the prize that lies at the end of this process of discovery and development. One of the things I've learned during my stay in Delhi is that there's a plan to start using body-worn cameras for the Delhi traffic police as well. The introduction of higher fines for violators has driven the need to make sure that there aren't accusations of corruption. And the proposal is that no fine will be issued unless an encounter has been recorded. Given the changes in behaviour that we've seen in other places as a result of these kinds of moves, I am confident that it will be a fascinating experiment which will show opportunities that could be used in other parts of the system.